Hello, free people of Earth, and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on Earth. A weekly program about authoritarianism, government overreach, and global injustice. Live from Chicago, Illinois. If tyranny is not at your doorstep, that's because there is someone in the street keeping it at bay.
We murdered my man like it was okay. For the life he ended, he got suspended with no pay. But if a man would've took the cop life, he would've got life and never again see the street lights and that stripe.
Hello, I am your host, Conrad Rogas. Thank you for joining me. This is episode 24 of This Week in Tyranny. Today is Friday, May 19th. And this episode will be about Montana banning TikTok. So on Wednesday, May 17th, the governor of Montana, Greg Gianforte, signed legislation to ban the Chinese-owned TikTok app from operating in the state, allegedly to protect residents from alleged intelligence gathering by China, making it the first U.S. state to ban the popular short video app. So TikTok has over 150 million American users. It's faced growing calls from U.S. lawmakers and state officials to ban the app nationwide. There has been more talk about this, about banning TikTok, banning all kinds of different apps. This is about potential Chinese government influence over the platform. So before I really go deeply into this, first thing I got to point out is this nationalistic thinking. This is a continuation of the nationalistic thinking that's been increasing lately. I'm not just talking about Russia versus the Ukraine. I'm not just talking about China and Taiwan. The polarization has increased in recent years. It's all this nationalistic thinking that is heating up and increasing now. And the big message, the messaging that's coming out is China is the enemy. Now, Chinese business practices are corrupt. Of course, the government is authoritarian, clearly. But that's not what this is about. This is an issue of free speech, free communication, and access to information. Now I'm going to get into this deeply, but just so we're clear, from the beginning, laws like this, so-called laws, I talk about laws versus dictates, these are dictates, but bills like this, laws like this are a test to see if you comply with and support censorship and centralized regulation. So it's a test, it's a practice run, kind of like people say COVID was a practice run. But not to go too deep into that yet. So if we do support this, then we allow ourselves to be isolated and separated, right? Separated from the rest of the world. And isolation is a crucial technique of cults and abusers. So basically people that do violence to others, manipulate others, and want to get them in a state and mentality of victimhood, to be a victim, they use isolation. That's a crucial thing. They begin with that. What I mean by isolation is like here with the TikTok ban, this cuts off the residents of Montana from a dominant information sharing platform, which is TikTok, right? And it's not about how you feel about it. It's a dominant platform of sharing information. Now, yeah, you could only share a few seconds of it, but it's the most accessible, and it's widely accessible, and it's virtually impossible to censor because there's so much. You can't really censor it. Content moderation on there is not as easy as they could do on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. But let's cut to the chase. Who would want to cut off Montana residents from instant free access to communication, and why? Why would Montana, out of all the states, Montana probably doesn't jump off the boat to you as one that's significant? But Montana is significant. And why is Montana significant? I'll give you a number, and the number is 65.7%. What does 65.7% mean? 65.7% of households in Montana own a firearm. Montana has the highest gun ownership rate of any state. And therefore, it is the highest gun ownership region in the world. Okay, so in humanity, the highest percentage of gun ownership is in Montana, in this state. And that's the reason for it. That's really the reason. I'm going to go all the way around 360 degrees and talk about it, but what's the reason they give? What's the alleged reason? What's the reason the politicians claim, the governor claims? Why are they banning TikTok according to them? So it's about misuse of user data and privacy, right? They're saying it's for privacy and safety because the Chinese Communist Party has influence over TikTok. It's Chinese owned, and therefore they could use that, use your personal data and use it against you, since China is an enemy of the United States. Okay, this goes back to the nationalistic thinking. It's all because China is the enemy. But the United States is not the first country to do this. Actually, we're following in Russia's footsteps. On August 4th, 2016, a Moscow in Russia, court ruled that LinkedIn must be blocked in Russia because it stores the user data of Russian citizens outside of the country in violation of its new data retention law. So that's actually the same thing. In Russia, they said LinkedIn, out of all things, LinkedIn, right? That was storing the Russian citizens' data outside of the country, just like this, and they banned it. So we're doing the same kind of centralized censorship as they do in Russia. Now, the reasons, it's not really about the deep down reasons of what TikTok is doing, what LinkedIn is doing. Get that this is the methodology of authoritarian governments, right? Who's more authoritarian than Russia, the former Soviet Union? And now it's us. It's the United States Soviet Union, the United Soviet Union of America. But as for privacy and information and data, I value privacy very much, right? And yes, sharing that data and selling it or using it in a predatory way, like I'm sure that the Chinese companies do, and American companies, it's a dishonest and a dishonorable practice, and I stand against it, right? So obviously, I'm not for just saying do whatever with our data. I'm not about just doing away with privacy, but it should not be illegal. It should not be illegal because it's a public utility, right? It's a communication platform, and public utilities should have competitors. You don't have to make it illegal. Just let the free market deal with it. The freedom can solve all problems in the world. So public utilities should have competitors. And then the company that's going to offer the most privacy can demonstrate proof that they are acting in good faith and securing the customer's privacy, and they will get the business. And that will be the people's choice. We would make the choice with our money of who we use. And if people do want to make the choice to turn their data over to a Chinese totalitarian government corporation and support them, what can you really do to stop them anyway? Right? Free will has to be a factor here. Free will has to be a determining influence here. You know, if you do stop them, you're just practicing your own form of authoritarianism, right? So what is the point, really? But over time, they're going to ban U.S. companies, citing the same rationale. First, it's TikTok, and then they're going to ban other companies. And basically, like I said in the beginning, if you're okay with this, if you say okay to this, obviously the handcuffs are going to get tighter and tighter and tighter, as we have seen with gun control, and as it's going to continue. That's why it's no accident that they're doing it in Montana. And then we won't be able to communicate. And when people cannot communicate, they are caged. They're enslaved and they're in prison. If you cannot communicate, you're in a cage. I recently saw a documentary movie named Spellers. It's called Spellers. And it's about non-speaking autistic children, right? That mainstream, of course, psychology and science, of course, says that they have a cognitive disorder, like saying that they're of low intellect, basically. And Spellers demonstrates that they are not dumb, okay? They're not slow. It's a motor issue that is preventing them from speaking. So through letter boards, right? The people with autism, severe autism, who can't speak, they teach them first better motor functions, and then they point to the letters until over time they develop the ability to deal with that sensory overstimulus, right? To then be able to spell. And now these people through this can write and speak and express themselves. And the reason I bring it up is because there is a woman, actually her name is Elizabeth Bonker, like incredibly inspirational person, and she used the phrase, one of the first things she said when she learned to communicate is that she was in a cage, and that not being able to communicate was agony, right? Was living in a cage. The reason I bring this up is because this is an incredibly intelligent person that was totally blanked and was suffering, and nobody even knew because they didn't have the voice, because they weren't able to communicate. So I know that's an extreme example, but you start banning stuff, you start banning free speech, you're getting there, you're on the way there. So this is just like when I make the comparison that, hey, tyranny is happening and we're going to be going into Auschwitz soon and the gas chambers. Yeah, that's a way down the road extreme example, but it's getting closer and closer and closer, and those extreme examples need to be listened to, because it's not that long ago that it happened, and it's going to happen again. I say we heed the warning of people like Elizabeth Bonker, and when somebody tells you if you can't communicate, you're in a cage and you're in agony, I take that very seriously, right? But anyway, this is the first instance of an entire public utility, an entire content sharing platform being outlawed in the United States. And this is different than torrent, and that's censorship. Pirate Bay shouldn't be getting blocked and all this, but this isn't even copyright infringement claims. This is just basic content sharing, and people should be up in arms about it. People rightfully spoke up during the pandemic for that censorship that was, that big tech censorship against this, the censorship of alternative medical information during the pandemic. People spoke out then, but this is the most egregious censorship yet. This is limiting an entire platform, an entire utility. It's like you can't have access to light or gas. That's how big this is, because people don't realize how significant information sharing actually is. It's like banning books, and not just a book. I'm talking about the whole thing, the whole idea, concept of books, right? Let's not underestimate how significant TikTok is, and how significant it will become over time. Okay. Now, overall, the quality of the information there, I agree TikTok is a cesspool. Like, I know. And it often shares violent and harmful content. Talked about that last week. It overexposes human beings to stimuli and then lowering the attention span. It does all these harmful things. I'm not saying that TikTok is a good thing, what it is, today. But it's about the principle. And the principle is freedom of speech. And well, who's defending freedom of speech in this case? Who's standing up for free speech? So TikTok's free speech allies include several Democratic members of Congress, including Representatives Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and First Amendment groups. This is a Reuters article I'm reading from. First Amendment groups like the American Civil Liberties Union. What a First Amendment group, right? These are the same kind of people that wanted to censor all sorts of speech when it comes to vaccines and elections. And by the way, I'm not afraid of YouTube censorship, so let me just repeat that. I'm talking about censoring people who talk about vaccines and elections, okay? And of course, government will take the side of free speech when it comes to gathering more control of the people. That's what it is. So they just flip-flop. That's politics for you. That's why it's a fantasy. And also, not just when it comes to controlling people, but when it comes to business. I wouldn't underestimate the money involved here. And what do I mean by that? I'll get to that in a second. But the app has become widely popular with teens. 67% of US teens aged 13 to 17 use TikTok. 16% of all teens say they use the app almost constantly. TikTok has said that the vast majority of its users are over the age of 18. But anyway, this is just backing up the point that a lot of children use it. Is it a cultural weapon against children, corrupting the minds of children? Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say that it's not. But the reason why they're banning it is because they're not in control of it. It's just business, okay? Like I said, so the new technology of super short videos, right? Of really short TikTok type videos, that's going to continue regardless. Nobody's actually going to stop that. But it's just they're not in control of it because a Chinese company is in control of it. So, YouTube Shorts is basically TikTok. So that already exists, and get this, there's a lot of money to be made if the government can take out the main supplier of that feature set, of that technology, and create what's called a market void. You know what I'm saying? So right now, who dominates the market? Who's the main supplier of that drug? Well, it's TikTok. And TikTok apparently doesn't have the buddy contact with the US government. And I talked about this in many of my videos about how government is a corporation and government is partnered with corporations. So market void, taking out the main supplier of the drug. Now this is just like taking out the main drug dealer. Say you got territory and you got the guy during the crack epidemic, okay? Everybody's on crack. And there's a guy supplying the whole borough, the whole neighborhood, right? This is like if you plot to take out the main dealer and that huge multi-million-dollar business, you can take it over now because there's a void, there's a vacuum. The people still need the drug. They still need the drug, but now you can come in, and because you've taken out the main supplier, you just step right into that. That void has been created, and you just supply them with what they need. And I spoke about this in my presentation, Babyface Criminality, about just the street, the criminal mindset of this, the way this is just a regular street move. This is just a road move. This is a gang member move. Easy. This is easy money for them. But it's legitimized through, suits and ties, 3-piece suits, and the podiums, they got a microphone like me. They got maybe even a better camera than me, and people just believe them. But the net effect of banning TikTok might be good. What I mean by that is, yeah, if you ban TikTok now, you'll probably do some good in the world. The net effect is if a couple children, say the people of Montana, can't spend their time on there, they might actually look for some real information. They might find a show like this. So it might be a very good net effect of result. But we can't make decisions based on net effect. Why? Because what that leads to is you end up being dependent and being ruled by and being a slave to whoever can provide the best lifestyle. Whoever can provide you with the best net effect, then they'll own you. That's why we have to make decisions based on principles and what's right. And then we worry about the net effect. Okay, the best outcome for us. And there are people just trying to provide you with that lifestyle, provide you with the lifestyle you need, provide you with the drug that you crave. I talked about this in my presentation, Babyface Criminality. Okay, this is just criminal movements. That's what government is. Government are criminals because government has no right to rule because government doesn't own us. Okay. TikTok is working on an initiative called Project Texas, which creates a standalone entity to store American user data in the U.S. on servers operated by U.S. tech company Oracle. So they're creating their own. They're going to create their own company that's going to store user data in the U.S. So that they could get around that law. But the reason this is just under the table business moves. This is Wolf of Wall Street type corporate movements. They're going to store our data anyway. We have no privacy anyway. They're selling our data anyway, but they just don't want to sell it to China because they're not in control of the profits, right? They're not the beneficiaries, and they're not the shareholders there. They want to create their own company that's going to store our data. Now, qualitatively, that's not going to improve our life. That's not going to make us more safe. These are just code words and corporate slogans to make it sound good so that we buy it. These are scammers. But ultimately, government doesn't own the people. This is about who's in charge of the people, right? It's not about actually helping them. It's about who's in charge of the data, who's in charge of providing you with the short videos. So ultimately, government doesn't own the people, so they can't make any decisions about what other people are doing with my data. They can't decide that because they're not my protectors and they're not my parents. Okay? And also, they're saying China is the enemy of the United States, but China is not my enemy. China is authoritarian, of course, and just because China constitutes a government, the government, the people who oppress others' rights, right? The rulers of China, those are my enemies. But that's because all government is my enemy, including the United States, including the governor of Montana, right? So don't let them fool you into thinking that you're on their side and against China. They're both against you, but they just want to isolate their so-called constituents so that they could more easily control you, like abusers do. So, thank you very much, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.
I'm fed up with that bullshit. I'm fed up with that bullshit.